I would like to welcome you and thank you for attending my presentation. I'm going to share with you one of the main threats on our main source of food and life, which is the soil, and the opportunities it presents for me and you, wherever you are. And I wish you join our Soil for Life project. The main question we'll be tackling here is how can we solve the soil degradation issue? The term soil sealing means the use of artificial surfaces for urban expansion, and this has many effects on the soil. The loss of soil biota that break down contaminants lead to the easier contamination of soil and water resources. The higher concentration of people lead to the higher organic and inorganic wastes, more competition and use of resources, higher risk of spreading diseases, and higher pesticide use since city people don't want bugs around. The loss of biodiversity, the loss of the native beneficial biodiversity, and the thriving of harmful invasive sewer and city-dwelling organisms. The loss of the soil's carbon sequestration capabilities, leading to increased warming rates. The loss of the soil's water retention capabilities, leading to an increased flood risk. On account of the off-site effects, I found no solely off-site effects, for soil sealing is mainly the expansion of passive entities that only when they produce some mobile waste can off-site effects occur. But I did find some landscape scale effects, which included the loss of land for food and fiber production and the higher risk of water and food-related diseases. The extent of this threat have many discrepancies or differences according to the different resources, but the estimates range from 1% to 3% of the world's land surface is covered with urban areas, but is expected to double by the next century. The main biophysical processes and factors involved here is the soil-water processes, for example, the infiltration and drainage of water. Nutrient cycling. Soil is the foundation of the nitrogen cycle, the phosphorus cycle, and the carbon cycle. Carbon sequestration, as mentioned before, soil can hold tons and tons of carbon. Climate regulation as a result of the soil's carbon sequestration capabilities. Organic matter decomposition by soil organisms. And the soil organism's habitat itself is all affected by and involved in the soil sealing threat. The main causes and drivers of this threat is the expansion of the world's urban population. I stress an urban here because there's a misunderstanding that the main cause and driver of soil sealing is the expansion of the world's population, and therefore the solution of this threat is annihilation or reducing the population. But it's actually the expansion of the world's urban population. More people are moving to the cities, and we need to know why. Insufficient, unenforced, or forgotten land use policies and laws. Economic advancements, and the development of and widespread of impervious artificial surfaces that are more economical to install and maintain than alternative options. I put that squiggly line next to economic advancements because not many countries are experiencing economic advancements nowadays. The main stakeholders involved in this threat are communities, urban and rural communities alike, the building makers, which include construction materials suppliers and contractors, and the government, especially the Ministry of Housing Utilities and Planning. Also, the real estate market players are involved, including prospective home buyers, investors in real estate, and the real estate developers themselves. To put the business as usual scenario into perspective, we'll project it 20 years from now. What if nothing is done for the next 20 years? Well, the ever-expansion of slums will resume its rapid course, consuming more and more fertile land, trying to satisfy the high urbanization rate with a projected 66% of the population in Africa living in cities by 2050. And as more people come into the cities, then jobs can be created, unemployment will skyrocket. The poor living conditions will provide an environment for many dangerous diseases. And as the houses are overcrowded with over 70 people per square kilometer by 2040, Clean water and electricity supply will be a lost luxury to many people. And as water resources get more scarce, conflicts will arise between nations that even could be the cause of war. And also, as many or most of the farmers will sell their land and move to the city, monopolization of the food supply will occur. But monopolization has its benefits as well as disadvantages, and since the monopoly players have more capital, they have an increased chance to use alternative, sustainable soil management strategies. And due to the high concentration of buildings, temperatures will rise to dangerous levels. And the population of the native beneficial species in that area will be at the brink of extinction, and the population of invasive and sewer and city dwelling animals will thrive. So in conclusion, the city will transform from a place where people want, love and wish to live in to a place where people have to live in to survive, since there is nowhere else to go. A pretty dull picture. So now let's move to the conservation scenario. What if something is done? We have to first look at the manageable factors, which include the further consumption of agricultural land or the speed of urban expansion, and the further growth of slums, or in other words, the quality of that expansion. There are many conservation measures to undertake these manageable factors, which include influencing planning policies to restrict land take, encourage the development of brownfields and developed land, and even downtown zone and inner urban development. Influencing land licensing laws. This will focus on encouraging and easing the buy and sell of brownfields and developed land. The use of building techniques, sustainable building techniques, for example, green roofs and roof water harvesting to maintain some of the soil's functions. The establishment of a committee to evaluate land as well as buildings, with its goal to establish fair prices and prevent their speculation, easing also the purchasing of land. Desealing. The effect of this measure is a reduction of sealed land and its transformation to agricultural land or even back to its previous state. And opening access to resources about sustainable design and planning. This will help the general public learn about sustainable design and planning and make informed decisions on that basis. And training the next generation of architects and city planners. This will grow the future architects and city planners to design tomorrow's sustainable cities. The location of the implementation of all these measures is first major cities and rural areas. Although major cities will account for 70% of the effort, rural areas are also important since they are both surrounded by agricultural land and they are both growing unsustainably. Now, with all these conservation measures, we need to fit them into the socio-economic context of the places we're applying them in. Influencing planning policies and land licensing laws through, for example, contacting representatives or even silent protests is not a viable option in the socio-cultural context of most people under the rule of corrupt or unstable governments. That's pretty much a negative score. The use of sustainable building techniques, such as green roofs, roof water harvesting, and permeable pavements. Cheap materials can be easily found to do this and has no apparent social constraint. Thereby, it's a positive option. The establishment of a non-governmental organization or committee is a possible option, but has some socio-economic obstacles. For example, since they're non-governmental, their power over the seller is limited to his conscience. But this obstacle can be overcome by the committee working with the buyer and not the seller, so it is still a positive option. Opening access to online resources is way more viable than paperback, but is still challenging in the sociological point of view since not all people have access to the internet, but efforts can be made towards the goal of widespread internet access, thereby it is still a positive option. Desealing is always an option but is a very expensive process and only has a 50% chance of even succeeding. Thereby, that's a risk that not all people would take. That's a negative option. And the training of the next generation in sustainable design and planning through, for example, open workshops and online courses. This is a viable option for all knowledge masters in this area. It's a positive option. The main implementers, who is responsible for applying all these conservation measures? You. You as an ordinary person can truly make the difference needed in your city. Knowledge masters and governments. Although governments are essential, governmental participation is essential for widespread impact, it is usually not a very productive implementer, since they look for the cheapest and fastest way to do it, and that's usually not the best. My final message to you is that you can truly make the difference needed in your city, and there are some ways to start. For example, sharing what you've learnt with your friends and family, starting a roof garden, making a simple rainwater harvester, or joining up with your neighbors to make permeable pavements around your neighborhood. And my final message to knowledge masters is to join forces with other knowledge masters and make open workshops and online courses to train the next generation of city planners and architects. So in conclusion, there are some very simple things that you can do that can truly make the difference needed in your city. I would like to thank Wageningen University and edX for the wonderful experience I had with them and the massive amount of knowledge I learned from them, and all the participants in this course that made it a wonderful learning environment, and my family for their positive encouragement and advice. And I would like to thank you for listening, and please join us in this Soil for Life project.